Come on, Brown.
Are you ready?
I'm ready, Brown.
.357 Productions is proud to present The Masonian, a monthly podcast for Freemasons with a focus on the grand jurisdiction of North Carolina. While not an official function of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina, we operate with the full endorsement of Grand Master Douglas Connell. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the participants and in no way reflect the opinions of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina, its members, or any appendant bodies. 357 Productions, we don't own this music, but as we say in every episode, if we did, we probably wouldn't be here. And we love it, so we're glad to play it. Tonight we're very fortunate we've got Kyle Sledge, who is a past master of Phoenix Lodge number 8 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's very active in the Scottish Rite and was recently appointed to the Board of Charters and Dispensations. Kyle, we're glad to have you tonight.
Pleasure to be here. Appreciate you guys having me.
Get up on that microphone there. Pull that thing will wobble right on up there where you're a lot taller than I am.
But like I was saying, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a fun drive up here. Appreciate Worshipful Brother Kim Michael driving me up here, and glad to be here.
So, we said that we operated with a full endorsement of Grandmaster Connell, and that's going to barely be true when this episode comes out at 1st of December, because we've got an installation coming up. Next year we'll be working hopefully under the happy auspices of Most Worshipful Brother Webster, our man. I think he'll let us run for another year.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Depending on how it goes here in the next 58 minutes, right?
He's a huge fan unless something happens in the next 58 minutes.
Which is always possible.
You never know.
We could run off the rails any second.
You never know. Before we get started, though, we forgot to do this last time, but we got to give a big shout out to all the people at Tractor Shed for making a fine meal. Again, It was an awesome meal.
Here.
You guys have to come in and make reservations. Check them out on Facebook. They have their own Facebook page. It's called the Tractor Shed. So, great meal.
Yeah, we love those guys. They're awesome. So, a couple of days ago, Ken Michael was up at the house here. He brought me some goodies, and we were talking about he was asking me what we were going to do for the episode this month. And I said, I don't know. Hadn't even thought about it. This was like 2 or 3 days ago. So we just got to chatting and talking about stuff, and we got talking about the funeral service. So that's going to be our major theme today, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. Before we dive into the main topic, though, let's just run through just a couple of things that are going on in Masonry in North Carolina, and things that have happened soon. Let me tell you a story though first. Last night, I went from here to Hillsborough, North Carolina, and did a program for Mosaic Lodge, and those guys have got it going on up there. I love that lodge.
I've never been able to visit them.
Man, so Mosaic is like this lodge. I'm probably going to be all wrong saying this because this is me kind of half guessing and half going with some gossip. But the way I understand it is they are called Mosaic, and they kind of have this real eclectic group of guys, right? They're not your conventional lodge. They're relatively new. They're number 760-something, 762, I think. So they hadn't been around that long. And I think their kind of overriding theme there is that, they take guys that maybe necessarily don't feel comfortable in other lodges. So they have a very diverse group. And it just made for the most unique and interesting conversation with those guys. They're deep, and they take it very seriously. And man, we had the best time. So they meet in Eagle Lodge. They meet in the same building with Eagle. Kyle, have you been to Eagle?
Have not been to Eagle.
Man, Eagle's great. Number 19, really old lodge. The building's really old. It's from, I'm really going off the rails here, but it's either just before or after the war of Northern Aggression, that war. So it's 1850s, 1860s, something like that.
We need to consult our grand historian.
Yeah, okay. So at this point, I'm just kind of making stuff up about the building, but it's really cool old building. And so they start off with a little table lodge-like thing. It's not an official table lodge, or maybe it is. And so they have a catered meal, and they have nice plates and table settings, and the stewards and the entered apprentices and the fellow crafts, like, serve everybody sort of. And then during it, there were some prescribed toasts. It's kind of like at Sophia, but like a cut down version of that. And we sang some songs. We sang 3 songs and had maybe 4 or 5 toasts. So it wasn't like a full blown harmony like we do at Sophia, but still it was really cool for a Tuesday night. And then we went upstairs and I did a program and just had really good conversation following that. And I just really appreciated the way those guys treated me. I do a lot of programs in a lot of lodges, and everybody's always really nice to you. But it was just a good experience, so I wanted to throw those guys a shout out, throw them a bone, and tell them how much I appreciated that experience. You'll have to go up there with me sometime.
No, I'd love to. So to all the brothers at Mosaic, keep doing what you're doing. It sounds awesome.
Mike Kinlan, do you know Mike Kinlan from Scottish Rite?
I've met him.
He's the master. Matter of fact, they had elections last night, so he's going out. But that was his year. And Ricky Williams, do you know Ricky from Scottish Rite?
I feel like I probably met all of them through you, but
yeah. Steve Burrell, Steve. He did the program for us the other night.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, good deal. He plays the piano. So when we were singing downstairs in their dining hall, they have a piano in the dining hall, and he's playing and we're singing. It's great. All right, beat that horse to death. This past weekend, we had John Palmer, most worshipful brother John Palmer. He's the past Grand Master of Tennessee. He's also the editor of Knight Templar magazine. He came and did a program for us at Sophia, and he did a program. Just want to talk about it here a little bit. It's our out time, Brown. We must start right at 9, huh?
8 o'clock.
No, man.
You're a little off on your clock.
Oh, yeah, we sure are. Okay, we'll go out at 9. How about that? It's not 9. Okay. So anyway, John Palmer came, and he did a program. He had written an article on neoconservatives and neo-moderns. Did you read this in Knight Templar magazine?
I briefly read over it, yeah.
Yeah, so more or less his premise is this. We all know our history, where in 1717 the 4 lodges came together and they started, the Grand Lodge. And a few years later, another group started another Grand Lodge, and they called the first group the Moderns, and they called themselves the Ancients. And the Ancients, as I understand it, were really saying that the Moderns just had it all wrong. And they didn't understand the way Masonry was supposed to be done, and the Ancients were going back to the old ways. John Palmer took that and parlayed it into an interesting article about what's going on in Masonry today in relation to the membership decline. And there seem to be 2 major camps. And one camp is the crowd that likes the one-day classes and they want to make it cheaper and more accessible. And he equated them to the to moderns, and he called them neo-moderns. And then the other end of the spectrum is like the TO crowd, the crowd that wants to make it, more important and more special, and with more depth and resonance. And he called those the Ancients, because of course the moderns and Ancients back then, in the old days, thought that each other were wrong, and these days the neos are at opposing forces also. And then he had a group in the middle that he called the status quo. But it was a very interesting article on where Masonry is today and how it's kind of diverging out into all these different philosophical ideas. If you get a chance to go back and read the article, or if the listeners do, I'm pretty sure you can find that online. It's Knight Templar magazine. I'm almost certain it's available online. If not, shoot us an email here. We'll shoot it to you.
Absolutely. No, I was going to say, especially with the moderns and the ancients, you're finding so many guys that when they do get initiated, they had this ideal image of what was going to be behind the tile door, much as I know a lot of us did. And, you get in there and it's the, heaven forbid, the shorts and flip-flops crowd. And, a lot of guys are trying to change that. It's a great thing, the guys feel comfortable in lodge, but I think we've lost some of the significance of what's truly going on when we meet in our buildings.
Well, Kyle, you have the makings of being a TO guy. You're going to fall into the same circles with us. The villagers will have the pitchforks and torches out before we get done taping this thing.
Well, I've enjoyed my visits up to Sophia. They've been great. Haven't had a chance to go out to Veritas yet, but looking forward to it.
Good. Yeah, Veritas is a great crowd. Are you going later this month? Are you going when Ken goes?
I'm going to do my best.
Yeah, man. If you can possibly make it. they're different from us, but it's still that TO style. I'm very comfortable with those guys. I love what they're doing up there. I'm so happy for them. Yeah, make it up there if you can. Now, their music is really cool because Ron Lamb plays the cello.
Now, he was the guy that played at Grand Lodge also?
Yes,
Okay.
same guy.
Very good.
So it's a really cool experience. When they did their ceremony of, I guess it was at their dispensation, where the guy played the Indian flute, the Native American flute. Were you there for that? Were you there for that?
Yeah.
Man, that was awesome too. So anyway, they do really cool stuff with music. We do too, but it's different because most of theirs is live. Anyway, get up there if you can. So the same weekend that we had John Palmer at Sophia, you guys had Rob Hurd. So tell us about Rob. What all happened?
Well, I mean, we had
Well,
our...
don't tell us everything.
Okay,
now.
we won't tell you everything. We'll leave some things to Fayetteville. But anywho, we had our 227th, we called it a table lodge. It was for the 227th anniversary of Phoenix Lodge in November 17th, 1788. Union Lodge number blank, as we know it, decided that it wanted to form a new lodge, and that was Phoenix Lodge, and that's our date for when we were established as Phoenix Lodge, when the name changed, and we were celebrating 227th years. Robert Hurd came and gave a really good Masonic education piece during the day. Had about a 2-hour talk with him, a lot of question and answers. Smaller group, but well worth it for those who were able to attend. And then we had the table lodge ritual that evening. It was a wonderful time. Robert Hurd was also the guest speaker at that. And like you were talking about with the harmonies, we had a lot of toast, and there was, I believe, 4 or 5 songs that we sang, and it was just a wonderful time.
Oh, you guys like it?
Oh, well, I mean, we have a bunch of guys that come from, in Fayetteville, we've got about 6 lodges in the outlying communities. So we kind of drew from, the guys that are really into bringing that aspect of Masonry back. And it's got a lot of lodge support, but it's tough to fill out sometimes 40, 45 chairs as far as getting people actually to come down to the event, because they're so not used to having these things when, traditionally this was something we did for every initiation, passing, and raising. So it was really cool to be able to bring back that traditional side, especially with an older lodge like Phoenix.
Well, how did you guys perceive Rob?
What's that?
How did they perceive Rob? How did he go over? I mean, to us, he's
Oh,
the
yeah.
man, the myth, the legend,
Right.
rock star.
Exactly.
Give him some love is what we're saying.
We trust and believe. We appreciate everything he did. There were a lot of guys, especially in the line. Something that really got me engaged and really excited was a lot of guys in the line were saying, I've never heard this kind of rhetoric before. And I was loving that they were engaged by it and saying, I've got to go home and do some studying and some thinking and look at the way I've been perceiving Masonry for so long. And, we always try to encourage guys, when a new Master Mason comes down the tube after having been initiated, passed, and raised, I always like to say, well, you need to check out this book, especially The Initiatic Experience by Robert Hurd. Just to kind of give them a little bit more light while they're in that phase where they're really searching, just to give them a good foundation to kind of continue on, and then steer them in the direction of other good Masonic authors.
Does he have you on commission for that?
No.
Nobody should. He said he sold all his books. Y'all, there was a big box of books, man.
I bought one. Everybody that walked out of that
We all
event,
have
they kept one. Yeah.
And Ray was with him? Ray Dunn?
Ray Dunn, yeah. Ray Dunn was actually initiated in Phoenix Lodge years ago, and he is now I hope I don't get this title wrong, the Grand Senior Steward of the Grand Lodge, Colorado. So
Awesome.
It was cool to see somebody that had come out of Fayetteville and done a little bit of traveling after he got out of the military and ended up in Colorado and doing so well.
And he's past master in 198. He was the master the year that I went out there.
Okay, really?
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I knew he was past master, but didn't know that.
All right, so everybody's had a great weekends. That's what we're saying. Great weekends full of Masonic stuff. Was that you, Brown?
No, that was my pen.
Oh, no. When this thing comes out we roll it out the 1st of December, there's going to be a couple of things coming up that I just want to... We got away from making a whole bunch of announcements like we used to. It was just eating up too much time. But 2 things I do want to point out. One is the grand installation will be held at Mount Hermon. Tyser told me the other day that we shouldn't call it Mount Hermon Lodge. They have some name for that thing. What is it? Is it the Asheville Masonic Temple, something, whatever it is, Tyshaw. Sorry about messing that up, but it's at the temple there. They call that thing 80 Broadway, I think is what they call it. That's the address of it. So when I hear them refer to it, that's what they all call it, 80 Broadway. So it's at 80 Broadway in Asheville. That is open to the public. If you've never seen a grand installation, Asheville is a wonderful place. It'll be beautiful. Maybe it'll snow in December. That'd be great. You should go see a grand installation, and especially for this one, we really, really like almost Grandmaster Webster, so we're really excited for him. The next thing that will be coming up that everybody really needs to have on their radar is the Prestonian lecture is coming January the 9th. He's going to speak in Greensboro. Every year, the United Grand Lodge of England solicits guys to write, I guess this is the way it works, solicits guys to write essays. They take the best essay, and that becomes the Prestonian lecture for the year. Mm-hmm. And the dude that writes it is the Prestonian lecturer, and they put him on the road, and he goes out and makes speeches. And he's coming to America. We have snagged him here in North Carolina while he's on the North American tour. His name is Worshipful Brother Rick Berman, and he has written several books in addition to this lecture. The lecture, as I understand it, which I got a copy of, they made that into a little book. I got that in the mail yesterday and started it last night. More or less is talking about the ancients and the moderns that we were talking about before, and how that was the whole time during that development. He's got another book that I just finished prior to getting this one called Loyalists and Malcontents, and it's about Freemasonry in the South during colonial times, mainly in South Carolina and Georgia. And so while he's here, I hope I'm not spilling any beans, he plans to go to somewhere at the University of North Carolina, one of their libraries up there. They got like 9 libraries. And I'm not sure if he's going to the Southern Historical Collection or one of the others, but he's going to do some research on North Carolina colonial times Masonry. So I'm hoping that he's going to do a sequel book. We're going to pin him down when he gets here. We're going to hold him down and waterboard him and see if we can get some information out of him. But I think he's probably at least considering writing about North Carolina, and I really hope he does, because you're familiar with the Parmore book, Launching the Craft.
Yeah.
So that's the only real written history that we have that I know of about that period of the formation of our Grand Lodge and the time leading up to it. So if another source would come along, that would be wonderful. I'm really excited about that. That is open to the public. It's going to be at the Greensboro Temple, January 9th. There is a harmony to follow down the street at the Carolina Theater. That will be ticketed. We don't have details yet. We're still working with some caterers and stuff. Everybody put that on your radar, though. It's going to be, you don't just get to see a Prestonian lecturer every day.
No, not especially when they have traveled that far across the pond. So
And you said January the 9th.
January 9th, Greensboro Temple, and you'll be seeing flyers on it and stuff. We got a flyer made up, but again, we're trying to find a caterer up there in Greensboro. Apparently, they're all very proud of their services in Greensboro. So we're used to paying a lot less than that in Salisbury and getting plenty good service. So we're working through it. We're going to get that done. 2 weekends ago, the Grand Lodge held a district deputy grand master and a district deputy grand lecturer meeting at Oxford. They've got to where I think Doug Caudle started this, and Bryant Webster is going to continue it. Most worshipful and right worshipful, respectively. The thing where they bring in the DDGLs and DDGMs to one location so that they can brief them all at one time. And they offer them some education and lay out their plan for the year and what they expect them to do and the things that they need to know. And I was there as a speaker. I was speaking about Masonic education. So I'm not really privy to everything that went on, but a few things that I kind of overheard. Here's some inside information.
There's
a spy among us. I was spying while I was there, see. And actually, I have a whole string of spies that were helping me keep this information together. But some things you're going to be hearing a lot about it. And one of the coolest thing that I heard that I really liked was Oxford is apparently going to have some form of an ambassador. And the DDGMs are going to appoint some ambassadors. Or they're going to make an appointment to be the ambassador to your district. So you'll have a DDGM, a DDGL, and an Oxford ambassador is the way that I understand this thing. And again, I'm in no official means am I explaining this, and they'd probably, Brian Webster's probably shaking his head right now saying, just stop, Ben, just stop until we get the official word out.
Going off the train tracks.
But it's going to be really cool, and the ambassador is going to like liaise between, ultimately Oxford and the districts, because the DDGMs and DDGLs they know some about Oxford, but they got plenty to do on their plate.
Yeah.
They can talk about it, but they're not really experts. This dude's going to be like an expert, right? Do I understand that right?
That was my understanding, and like I said, it's really important that aside from having the guys that are at the home that are more than happy to come and speak to your individual lodges, you've got somebody in that district that's able to be the cheerleader for our home, for our charity, and just to bring it a little bit closer to home. Because you hear it, we know it, but when you don't get reminded, sometimes things kind of fall by the wayside, as bad as that might be.
I like it. And they're going to have like a 3-year term, and they're going to go to some training, and it's going to be wonderful. So if you're really passionate about the home and you're in your district, go hit your DDGM up and start your campaign to become that. It's really an important deal. All right, I guess we beat the bushes enough here, shooting the breeze. Let's get to our subject matter. So when I was talking to Ken the other day about doing the funeral service, and he was talking about the fact that you do it, we had just had that weekend a situation where we had one of our brothers had passed away, and I was committed that weekend and could not be there. And we have one other brother who knows the funeral service, and he couldn't be there, the guy that taught it to me, actually. So there we were stuck short, and we made a few phone calls and just really couldn't come up with anybody to do it. So our master went to the funeral and did the funeral service by reading it, which is okay. But so it was fresh on my mind how important it was. And Ken was telling me that you do the funeral service, and I understand you're actually in this business. Tell us a little bit about your professional career and how it coincides and melds up with your Masonic career.
Well, my actual title right now, I'm a funeral service apprentice. I'm actually finishing up my embalming apprenticeship now, and then moving towards licensure. But it was something that was always an interest to me growing up. Hearses, not so much dead bodies or funeral homes, but just the more macabre side of life. And I've had several jobs after high school, but every time I turned around, funeral service was there, and it's truly. I guess to me, been a calling, much like somebody that's in the ministry, because you've got to have that want to do it, because it is one of those jobs that, you have to be able to flip that switch. You have to be able to look at the family when they're grieving. They're looking for somebody to kind of take them by the hand, guide them through this, because, when somebody passes away, the ultimate realization for the family is my loved one's gone, perhaps in body and in spirit, depending on beliefs, but for most of the people, especially in the Judeo-Christian world, the body's there, it's just the shell, the nut's gone. Yeah. And helping the family go from that point of, the ultimate loss to realization that, there will be a time that, we can all come back together depending on the belief system.
So did you know the funeral service before you got into this profession, or did you learn the funeral service after you got into this profession?
I learned it after.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely something that when I joined, I was actually working as an automotive upholstery technician. I was putting in leather in cars, and I really loved it. And I got to thinking, well, this is a great job. I love what I do. You get instant results, but I something more long term, something you can retire from. And funeral service was there, and I started going to school. And once I started going to school, got up with a local funeral home, finally got my foot in the door, which a little bit harder than I would have expected getting into the business. But after I got into the funeral home, decided, this is something I want to continue. And like I said, I'm finishing up my embalming apprenticeship and looking forward to licensure.
So were you a Mason when you got into this?
Yeah, yes.
And so so you were a Mason first, then you got into this profession, then you learned funeral service. Why did you learn funeral service?
Well, first and foremost, it was within the length of my cable toe. It was one of those things. I had been to a Masonic funeral service, and we had a living legend down in Cumberland County that did a lot of Masonic funeral services for a lot of folks. And, of course, he's no longer with us. But he put a funeral manual in my hand. It was the little white and pink book, looks like something that you would get from a funeral home, and it had the Masonic service laid out in it. And he said, you really need to learn this. So it was something that I took, and I said, well, definitely being within my scope, I said, this is something I need to take to heart and do. And it was one of those things that with a little bit of work, just like anything in our organization as far as learning ritual or catechism, you make the application, you take the time to do it, and eventually it came around. Recently, 2 weeks ago on Monday, I buried a member from a lodge in our district. I'm about the only guy that does it in our district from memory when I'm available. And not that I've been counting, but I've got tick marks in the back of my Bonson, and that was the 30th one I've done.
Wow.
So in the short time that I've been a Mason, been in the funeral service industry, I've definitely been put to work, and it's I like to say, an unfortunate honor and pleasure.
Wow. 30's a ton. You need to get some more guys down there to learn that thing.
Well, I always beat up, especially in my lodge, on the guys. I tell them, I just wonder who's going to read my funeral service. And I realize that there are situations where that's needed. You've got guys that have learned the funeral rites and they're ready to give them, but because of your job or family or something, you can't be there. And that works in those applications. But I always beat up on them because I've gotten a lot of praise and people say, well, you really did a good job on that. And I always look especially to the younger brothers and say, hey, you can pick this book up at the Grand Lodge.
Yeah, it's
important. Or I'll be happy to drive you there so we can pick you up one if this is something you want to learn, and I'll take the time to help you learn it. But it's one of those things you've really got to want to commit this to memory. Because just like prayer, if you don't have it spot on, it can sometimes come out a little lackluster, and this is the last tribute we can give to our departed brethren.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of it before we get. I want to kind of lead out with the importance of it. So when I learned the funeral service, there was an older guy in our lodge named Chesley Green who taught me all of the ritual. He got me certified. He got me the funeral and told me which one to do, and he taught me one of the ones out of this book. So we know that there are two versions in this book, plus the memorial service in this book. This is the Bonson Manual, and these are kind of the older ones. And then they have a couple more in this book, which is the ceremonies book. This is the one that I learned out of, although Chesley had me move a particular section. That little part, in the one that I do, there's a part that goes, soft and safe to thee, my brother, be thy earthly bed. Do you do that one?
Bright and beautiful, you're rising from it.
Yeah, so that one is kind of in the 3/4 point in the service that I do in the book. But Chesley said that used to be at the end, and you led out with that, and he taught me to do it that way. He said that when they redid this book, that they changed it, and he didn't like it, so he taught me the old way. And it is a beautiful way to lead out, because I walk up and lay my hand on the casket and say, soft and safe to thee, my brother, be thy earthly bed. And, it's a real powerful lead out, more so than the other. And then a couple of years ago, they came out with this book. Kyle has the hard cover version. I have the soft cover version. But I understand that Gene Cobb was instrumental in doing this one. And this is pretty much what, if anybody wanted to learn it, or if you want to know anything about the funerals, you can find it in either of these other two books. But you're going to want it. This is your go-to book because it's got all the services in it. It's got 5 traditional services, a cremation service, one for short and one for inclement weather. It's got a ceremony of remembrance. It's got something for spread and ashes. It's got subordinate lodge necrology service, which I thought was interesting. I'd like to see us do that sometime, but we haven't yet. And then the Grand Lodge necrology service. So pretty much everything you're going to want to know about the funeral service you can find right here. You can get this book from the Grand Lodge. I don't know what it costs, but I'm betting it's around $20 or so.
I was going to say about 15, but I'm not 100% sure. So
yeah, and it depends on if you get the paperback version or the hardback version. But it's reasonably priced like everything else. Every lodge needs to have at least one of these. If you don't want to purchase one for yourself, I highly encourage every lodge to have. As a matter of fact, I think they sent one to every lodge. But sometimes, if you don't know where yours is in your lodge, order another one or find it. Because if you ever have to do a funeral service and you can't find one of the guys that know it from memory, somebody's going to be stuck doing it. And you're going to find much better information about how to do that in this book than you are in either one of these. Mm-hmm. These just have a service. This has a lot of explanation and telling you things to do. So I kind of went through here today and hit some highlights of some things that I thought were important and wanted to talk about. The overriding theme, I think, in this book, though, and in the whole change in 2012 when they did this book, that Gene Cobb wanted to bring out, Right Worshipful Brother Cobb, is that we should not be rigid with our ceremony. We should tailor the ceremony in any way that we have to tailor it to make this thing respectful for the family, but to understand that the family is grieving and that the ministers, whatever faith you're dealing with, are sometimes can be territorial, and certainly us Masons can be a little territorial, some places more than others. But I know I have heard him tell many stories about. I've heard Gene tell a lot of stories about these. He's both for I guess everybody knows, Right Worshipful Brother Cobb is both our fixing to be our deputy Grand Master as soon as we have installation. He's also a Methodist minister by trade, and he knows the funeral. He's like our funeral service expert. So between all of those things, he's kind of like the go-to guy. I've heard him do programs on this for Wilkerson College Lodge, and he has tons of stories about funerals gone bad, both from a minister's perspective, mainly though talking about Masonic funerals where Masons did the wrong thing by trying to say, well, we've got to have the last word, or we've got to stand over here, or you can't, we've got to be the pallbearers, or we've got to do this, or we got to do that, or we got to do the other thing. He's also got a lot of stories about ministers that just didn't, for whatever reason, didn't want the Masons there intruding on their ceremony, and, were out of bounds with, not wanting to play nice. And at the expense, no matter who's wrong, that's always at the expense of the family, right?
Because they're the ones that are going through it. We're just there around them trying to make them feel better, to remind them that, hey, your loved one was a brother, and, we're here to honor his memory and all the commendable virtues that he taught on to you folks, the family. And, it can be tough sometimes.
And we've got a prime example of that is right before the book came out or right after. We had the privilege of being with Right Worshipful Cobb at our home lodges. He is a member of Blackmer, to lay to rest one of our members. And we had an incident at the church where it wasn't that the preacher was against us by any means. He just wasn't real sure of what it is we were going to be doing. And it was kind of a sticky situation right there. Because it was getting time for everything to start happening. And it was really nice to see. We'd all been talking about this book at that point, and I got to watch Brother Ben here and Right Worshipful Cobb do it, and how he handled himself with that preacher. And it was very impressive. It really was. But that's a prime example of some of the stuff he was talking about.
Yeah. So over and over and over in this book, they talk though about being flexible, working with the family, keeping the family's interest in mind, not yours, because. As Masons, we're so used to working in our degree work, in our ritual, in a rigid system. You walk over here, you turn there, you change staffs.
You say this when you arrive here and there.
Yeah, and there's no flexibility in that, none. So we tend to, when we're doing any ritual, want to carry that over. And this is not the place to do that, and this is the point that they continue to make over and over and over in this book. So, there's all these services, 7 or 9 of them, however many are in here, but they say right off the bat, just amend them any way that it makes sense. Just make sure that you do it with dignity and respect, right?
Amen. Well, I think one thing I found, the biggest way to endear yourself to the officiant who's leading the service, especially if you come up against one that's not really sure who we are or why we're there or, what to expect, is at the end of the funeral service, there's a benediction to be given either by the master or the person performing the service. And I always offer to the minister the fact that, hey, we do have a final benediction because usually they set us going last, but I'd like to offer that benediction to you. you're the man of the cloth, you're the religious priest or whoever is at the service. I'd rather defer to you. And I found a lot of times that ingratiates you enough to them that, even if they are uneasy about you, they'll say, well, these guys aren't so bad, thinking about including me after I've told them you've got the last word, and, you're letting me get back in the ceremony and finish it off. So.
Don Barrier is our good buddy in Charlotte, and he does the Masonic service. What lodge is Don in? What's the name of that lodge? Dorada. He's in Dorada Lodge. And he told me about going to do a funeral service for another lodge as a courtesy. Mm-hmm. And the lodge got mad at him for something. I can't remember what it was. He wanted to put the apron on the coffin at some time, and they didn't want to do it at that time. Or some local custom that they had. And he wanted to do it a little bit different, and they got plumb mad. So, we need to be tolerant with each other as well as with everybody else.
Well,
I bet you could tell stories forever.
Well, I mean, and being in the funeral service business, that's one thing that we have in the profession is that you have to be flexible, because when people are going through the grieving stages, I mean, there's elated happiness or sadness, or there's downright people being downright angry at you. I mean, you walk into all sorts of situations, and people handle the grieving process differently. So it's always good to approach with an air of caution and just kind of judge the system before you jump in head first.
So apparently in 2009, according to this book, we decided that we were going to allow funeral services for Master Masons and Fellow Craft and entered apprentices. So there's some there's 2 code references in this book that explain that if there's ever any question. And there shouldn't be a question because it's in the code, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of guys that remember the old ways, and they remember that you couldn't do it.
Master Mason only.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time at Wilkerson College, when I teach that class, that you're going to be shocked and amazed when you get to be master at the amount of times that guys will tell you that the code says you have to do this, or the code says you can't do that, and they're just plain wrong. And a lot of times it's because it's the way it used to be, and they've changed some rule, and they don't know that it's been changed, but that's the way they remember it when they had a crisis with that particular problem. So it always pays to go to the code if somebody's telling you that you got to or can't do something by the code. Lesson to the younger guys and the younger masters, go read it for your doggone self. But this thing has code references in it, and so it talks, if you ever run up against that, that's certainly in here. Talks a little bit about what to do if you run up against different faiths. Certainly in this part of the world, we have Master Masons of different faiths, but we're predominantly a heavy Christian in this part of the world. I know quite a few Jewish brothers, mm-hmm. And I know just 1 or 2 Muslim brothers. And I would imagine that probably with a Muslim service, I don't personally know anybody that's done a Masonic funeral service for a Muslim brother, and probably we would not be involved in that, but it's possible.
I mean, I know they have their own customs and traditions. They teach you that in school. But, I mean, as far as 6 years I've been in the funeral business, working for a funeral home that did 300-plus calls a year, we never had a Muslim service. I did more Buddhist service than Muslim services. Yeah. Which Buddhist service is pretty cool. They have a nice little meal in the back while the service is going on. They're preparing it. It's always nice to see the other cultural traditions, especially when it comes to mourning and the passing of someone from this life to the next.
That's pretty cool. It says in the book, though, again, just right back to the same point. They said if you run up against another culture, just talk to them. Mm-hmm. Talking to them is the most important thing you can do. Honor their traditions, and just see how you can work in our service with theirs and make everybody happy. A couple things I wanted to read here. Here's some things it says to do. To provide comfort to the family and cooperate with the community of faith. That's just what we're talking about right there. The family's needs are the priority. To focus on fraternal and not religious issues. And so that's just right what we're talking about. Don't get in a fight with a preacher no matter what you do. Because what we're really wanting to do here is build a bridge, and this is right out of the book, between ourselves and the houses of worship, right? especially during this time when the family's grieving. We certainly don't want to be a detriment to them. And offer flexibility in the service. And it also, another change, if you go look in the back of this book or in any of these books, it's got a diagram that shows where everybody's supposed to stand. And some lodges are pretty flexible about that, and I understand are pretty rigid about it. But it says right in here that you can do it with as little as 2 people, one acting as chaplain and one doing the actual service. And I wouldn't be a bit afraid to do it with one person if that was just the kind of bind I was in and didn't have any other option, because this thing gives you broad powers to change it. But a lot of guys I've heard say that, well, we've got to line up, we got to have the stewards with their staffs, or we've got to wear white gloves, or we've got to line up on this side so we can drop our Spriggs vacation. And you don't have to do any of that, or you can do all of it. It's your lodge's custom to do it any way, that you can work out. Again, just don't be too rigid with the whole doggone thing.
And when it comes to your individual lodge, you're thinking about this Masonic Funeral Service, even though you don't have an imminent death or one that you've got to do a service for, maybe talk about it at a state of communication. What parts of this funeral service do we want to include? Is there anything that we really want to highlight or accentuate or make this our own, while at the same time realizing your customs need to be flexible with those of the families that we're there to comfort and grieve with. So,
a couple more things I had highlighted here. It says that if you wear aprons and gloves at the grave, then they should all be white. So they're encouraging you not to wear your lodge aprons that have the master's jewels on them, and I assume if they're Grand Line officers that they wouldn't wear all their bling. They just want you to wear white.
Or past masters or anything like that.
Right.
Everybody's uniform.
And of course, if somebody shows up with that, you just let them. Or if some lodge, if that's their custom to do that, I guess they just do whatever they want to do, and that's okay. Going right back to the spirit of the book here, but the suggestion is go with plain white. The so-called last word at the grave is not required by Masons. They say that in this book a couple of times. And then they talk about it is permissible.
If anything happens, though, I just got to throw this in there. If anything happens to me, Rob, I expect you to fly in for my funeral, and you have to wear your apron with the skull on it.
Skull and bones.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's required, Rob. Just saying that. Just had to throw that in there.
I get him to bring Cliff's apron, and we'll put that on you. We'll bury you with that.
That'd be awesome.
Or Ray's or somebody, so he can bring an extra from over there. At least we'll send you to your last reward clothed in that apron that you love so much.
I love that apron.
So what we're talking about is Enlightenment 198 has this apron, and it's like black, and it's got tears on it, and I don't want to give all of it away, but it is a really, really super cool apron, Scottish Rite looking kind of thing.
Very, very amazing.
Man, they are awesome, and me and Riley just absolutely love them. Riley especially is just absolutely gaga over those things. As a matter of fact, he's thinking about joining as Enlightenment as a honorary member or some auxiliary member or something, just so he can get one.
That'd be great.
Affiliate member.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. When Rob Hurd was down for the Table Lodge event, in the archive room where a lot of guys were changing from the speaking event to the other, he had his apron laying there, and I was just looking at it, silver fringe and everything. It was really cool to see the picture. I had seen the apron I had seen in so many pictures right there in person. So
every time he speaks here, if he has time during the question and answers, I'll say, "What kind of apron's that you wearing, Rob? Is that some kind of Scottish Rite thing?" And he'll have to explain all about that. I do it just so he'll have to explain it over and over. It's pretty funny. And it says in here, apparently there used to be a rule, or at least a well-known custom, that if you had Masonic pallbearers, that they had to all be Masons. And they specifically say in here that that is not true. I'm assuming the reason they're saying it in here is because they had a problem with it at one point, where some crowd of Masons probably said, no, we've got to, all the pallbearers have got to be Masons, and it's just not, it says it's fine to mix them. It's nice if they're all Masons, but they don't have to be.
And the biggest thing is follow the family's request. I mean, the family or the individual that we're serving, the brother who's dearly departed, go with their wishes. I mean, let them have their day. We will have another day for us. So, good Lord willing.
Here's something I thought was interesting. Got to put my spectacles on to see it though. It's recommended that those using such passages do so with the holy book of the faith of the deceased. So if you were doing a Jewish brother, I guess you would use the Torah. Or if you're doing a Muslim brother, I guess you would use some passage of the Quran. And what it's saying there, if you read the whole passage, is it's saying to consult with their minister or their leader of their house of faith, and just see what they think is appropriate and make sure and coordinate with them. I never really thought about that, but
Well, I mean, it's just like with the Jewish funeral. If you had one, we talk about in the straight service in the book, your mortal frame shall now come again into newness of life. In the Jewish faith, the resurrection of the body is not clearly taught, but the resurrection of the soul is. So, that would be something that if you were up against a Jewish funeral, you would possibly take into consideration and say, well, how can I possibly tailor this to fit a little bit better? Especially when you're dealing with the more Orthodox crowds. There's a lot of Reform Judaism, especially in Fayetteville, but you'll hit those Orthodox pockets, and you say something like that at a funeral service, and you got half the people just freaking out, minds blown. So
communication's the key, always,
absolutely,
isn't it?
absolutely,
In everything.
Better to ask and know than not to ask and just blow everything up.
The last thing in the book, and then I'm going to lay it down, is there's a ton of poetry in the back of this book that they allow you to use at different places in the ceremony, or pretty much anywhere you want. And I've never used any of it. I learned the service that I've learned, and I'm comfortable with doing that. But I love the idea of reading poetry. I use it as Masonic education sometimes when we're don't want to have a short night or something. And poetry and music are both powerful tools when it comes to any kind of ritual, I think.
Help to soothe the soul.
Yeah, so I encourage everybody to use those, and I'd like to know how it goes. Have you ever used them?
I've never used poetry, but I have often entertained the thought of maybe opening up with a poem, especially there's one in there that talks about when I knelt where Hiram knelt. It's a nice little poem, but I've never personally used any, but something to think about, Just like most things, you talk about being flexible. You do one service this way, maybe try it a different way another time. It might work better or work better in a different situation.
So they go on to say in the book that it's okay if you have to read it. If you can't find a brother that knows it, then it's okay to read it. But I want to make an impassioned plea to all the ritualists in the state, and I know we've got a lot of them. The good ritualists know that they're good. And if you're a good ritualist, pretty please with sugar on top, learn the doggone funeral service. It is, if it needs to be read, if you're in a bind, then it just does. But we, as Masons, should be able to come up with 30-some thousand members. Nobody ever seems to be able to pin down exactly how many members we've got in the state. They used to say 41, and now they're saying 38, but that includes the affiliate members, which means I count for 3 Masons. But I'm sure somebody may know the number, but nobody's ever able to give it to me. But I think it may be somewhere in the neighborhood of 34,000 or so. But with 34,000 guys, we ought to be able to find enough that can learn that funeral service to give it. You ought to be able to have 2 or 3 in every district at least.
It's so important. I mean, it's right there with the 3 degrees. I mean, we owe it.
We owe it to
that
them.
brother.
We owe it to them and their family. And it is one, Kyle, I'm just going to let you run with this for a minute. I'm going to lob you up a softball here. But it's one of the only true ritualistic things that we do in public. And not only is it important for that, do we owe it to that brother, which we absolutely do, Riley, and do we owe it to his family, which is now our widow, and or orphans if there are any. But I think we owe it to the fraternity as a whole to put forth that good public image. It's our most powerful recruiting tool. We get tons of petitions after people see it done well. It brings us a lot of money. We get a lot of checks from widows sometimes after that happens. But none of that's as important as the fact that it is a way for us to wear our masonry openly where people can see it once in a while. Run with it, Kyle.
I mean, like you said, it's one of the few opportunities that the public at large really gets to see what masonry is about, who we are. Sometimes it's refreshing to see the officiant who's standing over to the side that is just retired and giving us, reign of the service, and we're trying to close it out, and you're saying things that were just echoed in his comments graveside, and just seeing the light bulbs going off saying, hey, these guys aren't so bad. You know, we're here doing the last good deed we can do for our brother. Like I said, more especially, that's just the nut, or just the shell. The nut's gone, so we're doing this for the family. You know, and when you're standing there in front of that widow, not only to be able to know what you're saying, but to feel it here in your heart, you can put that extra emphasis. You can give them that compassion, the strong reassurance that, you know, this might be a stopping point at this time, but due to our beliefs, you know, there will be a time to come again. And you're literally looking at that widow. You're looking at that daughter, that son. And it's just a powerful thing to be able to look at them and say, you know, not only am I saying this, but I believe it. And not only that, but your loved one believed it also.
I try to look at them. Sometimes I can't look at them, especially if I know them. I can't look at them.
It can be tough, but
I tell you what will happen, and we live in a small community here, so I pretty much bury the folks, for the most part, in our lodge and in Troy's lodge. They don't have anybody that does it. So I've only got really 2 lodges that I do it for, although I have gone off and done it for other lodges. But there's only 24,000 people that live in this whole county here, so it's a small place. You know, everybody kind of knows everybody, especially in the Masons. You know, usually we know the folks. And I, to this day, there are many widows that I see, or daughters of Masons, or, you know, not so much with the guys, because, you know, guys are too tough. But I'll see them across the grocery store, and I'll see them almost start to tear up. I'll see them 40 feet away, and they'll start to tear up. And I can't even, I mean, it's, you know, it's hard.
it makes your heart swell, yeah.
But you know but the point is, I mean, that you know how much it meant to them. You know how much it meant to them to be able to send their loved one off with dignity and respect, and they're not, I guess in a way, when they see you and they tear up like that, they're thinking about their loved one, but I know that they're thinking about that service and how powerful that service was. Because, you know, if I just got up there and read a poem or something, or read the thing and didn't put, you know, any emotion into it, it wouldn't have grabbed them where they're still 3 years later tearing up every time they see me.
Absolutely. And I haven't heard you do a funeral, and I'm sure it's amazing. I've had the privilege of helping Ben do several of them for our lodge. And knowing Ben as long as I have, I think it's not just doing the last rites and what we owe him, but, you know, he, as I'm sure you do as well, puts a lot into it because that person meant something. And I think it's for you, I see it as you wanting to portray to the family and to our community and to all the people there that we loved him too. You know, that you know, we loved him. And I see that a lot when you're doing yours.
And so all the arguments that I get from the good ritualists that I approach and say, man, you're a really good ritualist, and why don't you learn this funeral service? And they never have a good excuse. I'm busy. Well, hell, everybody's busy. They ain't no busier than I am. You know? Everybody can make time to learn the funerals. It's not that long, especially for guys that are used to doing ritual and have learned long parts of ritual from Masonry anyway. You know, the guys that know lectures that take 25 minutes. This thing doesn't take, mine takes 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't take that long, and they can do it. And so I wish you guys would please consider doing it. It's vitally important.
And another thing I'll offer is, being that this is in print, you can always record this on audio, and you can have it in the car while you're going down the road.
Didn't think about that.
I mean, it's right here in print. No reason why you yourself can't record it and have it to go down the road with. I mean, there's always time. It's about finding the time, wanting to find the time to learn it. Absolutely.
Riley, what do you got left, buddy?
Well, before we close out, as always, we need to thank Brother Brown in the shadows back here. He is not on camera much, but if it wasn't for him, this wouldn't all be possible, and we don't thank him enough, so we'll take time to thank him for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got a T-shirt for you. We love, Brown, nobody knows how much work Brown does, so appreciate you pointing that out, Brown. We love you, buddy. We got T-shirts made. They're not for sale, but if you do us a solid for 357, like coming up here and being a guest speaker, then you get one. So we're going to send you home with a T-shirt. Where's one at?
I got one right here.
Hold one up, buddy.
Well, that's
Let everybody
awesome.
see
I appreciate
that. Hey, our buddy Ryan Flynn did this design. And it's just got 357 on the front. This is the back of it, though. So this is like a Norse Viking dude. Brown just was really into this Norse stuff, and I really like it myself. And so this is what he came up with. Ryan Flynn absolutely rocks. He's a Masonic graphic artist. He does lots of artwork. He's got a new printout. Just a shout out to Ryan. Go RyanFlynnArtist.com or something like that. If you Google him, you'll find him. Tons of good art. Go get that. So we appreciate the design. Kyle, thank you for making the trek all the way up here.
Hey, it's my
Ken
pleasure.
Michael's hanging out in the back. I don't know if you can see him on camera, but he brought Kyle up here. Again, he's beating a pretty steady path up here. And we appreciate all the work that he's doing for us, and we appreciate you making the trip.
Hey, it was my pleasure. I appreciate what you guys are doing for us here in North Carolina.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Masonian. For more information and productions, please visit and like our Facebook page at 357 Productions or visit our website at 357productions.net. You may also email us at 357productionsteam@gmail.com. Again, that is 357productionsteam@gmail.com. As always, tell people that you love them, and remember, we meet on the level and part on the square.